Alhamdulillah. Nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruh. Wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina. Wa min sayyiati a'malina. May yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu. Wa may yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'd. To proceed. Know that all praise is due to Allah alone. We seek Allah's help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evil in our souls and our bad deeds. Whom Allah guides will never be led astray, and whomever Allah leaves astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity but Allah, the one having no partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allah's final slave and messenger. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who have believed, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in submission to Allah. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O people, be dutiful to your Lord, who created you from one soul and created from it its mate, and dispersed from both many men and women. And fear Allah, through whom you demand mutual rights and revere the wombs that bore you. Indeed, Allah is ever over you, a-Raqib, an observer. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. Yusli lakum a'malikum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum. Wa may yuti illaha wa rasuluhu faqad fawza fawzan 'azima. O you who have believed, fear Allah and speak words of appropriate justice. Allah will then amend for you your deeds and forgive you your sins. And whoever obeys Allah and Allah's messenger has certainly attained the most excellent attainment. So in review, on Sunday, September the 10th, we began our journey into the concept of qasr, the shortening of obligatory prayers when we are traveling, when we are Musafir. And to perform qasr salah, one needs to qualify as a traveler. We explored the distance and time criteria for becoming a Musafir, noting that the Quran and Ahadith do not provide a specific measurement for this. Instead, Islamic scholars have attempted to derive these criteria based on various historical measurements like barids, farsakh, and midis. We examined the complexity and ambiguity of this process, with different scholars arriving at different conclusions, such as 48 miles being a common measurement. We established that Islam encourages free and critical thinking. While respecting the efforts of Islamic scholars, it is essential to distinguish between divine Sharia, Islamic law, and human-derived fiqh, jurisprudence. We scrutinized the applicability of historical measurements in today's context and focused on the applicability of historical measurements in today's context, and highlighted the command of God to make Islam easier to practice within the goals of Sharia. And finally, we underscored the idea that not everything derived by scholars is equivalent to divine revelation, and that flexibility is needed or is to be adapted with Islamic principles and practices to modern circumstances. In September the 17th, I introduced some fiqh terms to you, ikhtilaf, disagreement or differences, and the need to embrace the beauty of diversity in Islamic scholarship. When scholars have differing opinions, we are told that it is a gift from Allah. This diversity allows us to choose interpretations that suit our circumstances and minimize hardship. All this has led to the emergence of 4 orthodox legal schools, fostering a rich tapestry of thought. Clearly, I'm not talking about liberalism or progressive Islam, which has disconnected from tradition, and it is certainly not the way forward. So I want to make sure that we do not use words progressive Islam, because progressive Islam and people that follow progressive Islam are people that take liberties regarding democracy, regarding gender equity, regarding capital punishment. They will say, we know Islam says this, but polytheistic marriages. So the progressive Islam, so to speak, is just people following their nafs, doing what they want to do, changing the religion, which is a bid'ah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said very clearly in Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 3, this day I have perfected for you your religion and completed my favor upon you and have approved for you Islam as religion, as deen, as a way of life. Muhammad ﷺ said, whoever Allah guides, no one can lead them astray. Whoever Allah sends astray, no one can guide them. The truest word is the book of Allah, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad ﷺ. The evilest matters in religion are those that are newly invented, for every newly invented matter is an innovation. Every innovation is misguidance, and every misguidance is in the hellfire. And yes, you may have heard me sometimes use the word liberal. I'm probably considered a liberal imam. I do not mean it in the context of whatever you want to do goes. I mean that I take a path that is easy, as the Prophet ﷺ has instructed us. He said it's not the facing of the east, it's not the facing of the west, it's not the right wing effect or the left, it's the middle road. So we must respect what Allah, Azza wa Jal, the Prophet ﷺ, and scholars have said. For example, language in the masjid should be accessible, echoing the example of the Prophet ﷺ, who spoke to the people in their language. When it comes to matters like the distance defining safar, a traveler, there is no fixed number. It is a state of mind. Don't get caught up in technicalities. It is about what you feel when you're on a journey. It is about common sense, culture, and your own understanding. If you remember, Ibn Taymiyyah said this. In essence, Islam thrives in diversity, adapts to the times, and respects individual understandings. So we as believers, trying to elevate our ranks as seekers of the divine in pursuit of the alchemy of happiness, need to stay true to the core values and principles while embracing the evolving world around us. And so now in the last part of this class, I will enter, and it will definitely take 2 classes to cover this, but I'm going to talk about how long one can be a traveler, be considered a traveler, and continue to pray qasr. So how long can I be a Musafir, someone who is traveling, and pray qasr? At what time, after I have moved out somewhere or traveled somewhere, do I stop combining the prayers? Again, I want to remind you that safar, traveling, is a state of mind, not a distance. One is a Musafir when you travel outside of your city to a distance that you and a responsible, sound, stable person, non-battered, would say is traveling. This Imam Taymiyyah said this. What this means that this is relative, and one doesn't need to consult with the faqih, an Islamic jurist, legal scholar, or expert in Islam to get the answer. If one is asking someone, it means one doesn't understand the spirit of the Quran, Sunnah, and fiqh about being a Musafir, a traveler. 2 people can make the same journey, and depending on their culture and habit, one will be a Musafir and the other will not. One will be considered a traveler and the other one will not. And let's take a few examples. Let's talk about the CEO that takes a private jet every day to work 200 miles. They leave at 8 in the morning and they come back at 5 in the afternoon. This person is not a Musafir. That's their daily routine. There are people that live in New Jersey and they take a helicopter into New York City every single day. Are they considered a traveler? So at the same time, the one that goes the same distance for a one-day trip, and this is not their regular normal daily routine, depending on their culture and habit, could qualify as a Musafir. And for example, I went to Sanford, knew I was going to be giving 3 speeches. I was going to be traveling, juggling a lot of things. I had to consider, am I a traveler today? Is it difficult for me? And I decided I wasn't a Musafir. Someone else could have decided they were. And this is one of the reasons why I don't recommend that reverts, converts, new Muslims involve themselves heavily in fiqh. I want to teach you about it. I want to demonstrate how it comes about. I want you to understand that you need to know what fiqh is from the Quran and Sunnah and what is man-made. You need to look at it in light of the world that we live in. So is qasr, the practice of shortening the 4 rakat prayers when traveling, obligatory? Is it wajib or not? And again, this is going to further explain why I'm so careful with reverts and fiqh. So for example, most scholars say that it is mustahab. It is a beloved thing. It is recommended and favored. Mustahab is favored. You should pray the 4 rakat as 2, but it is not wajib. Now, what's interesting, the word wajib is a term that exists in the Hanafi school only. It is defined as an essential and necessary task or duty that has become definite through sound evidence. It is similar to fard, and I took this straight out of a Hanafi fiqh book, which is a stronger obligation. How confusing is this for a new convert or new revert? Hence, if a person performs whatever reason the full prayer and they are Musafir, the prayer is valid. The person is not sinning, but they have gone against the Sunnah. When one is in the state of safar, one is traveling, one is rewarded by Allah for shortening the prayer and not praying the 4 rak'ah. So every 4 rak'ah salat, when we are traveling, becomes 2 rak'ah. Ibn Omar, may Allah be pleased with him, reported in Bukhari, I did safar with the Prophet ﷺ and with Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, and with my father Omar, may Allah be pleased with him. And in every journey, we prayed qasr. We combined the prayers. This was their habit. So qasr is the default. It's what I do when I have packed a bag, perhaps turned down my water heater, told the post office to hold my mail. To not do qasr is to go against the sunnah, but it does not nullify the salat. It does not make it batil, invalid, false, null and void. So the opposite of batil is sahih, which means valid, sound, or true. So when you hear someone say this is a sahih hadith, it means that it is sound, it is true. It does not have any falsehood, any daif, any doubt. And so there were 5 specific conditions, and I just want to briefly touch on this in the science of hadith, that were called out for something to be considered authentic. And the first one is an isnad. An isnad means chain. It's the chain of narrators. So often you will find that when you're reading, it will say, this was narrated by so-and-so, by so-and-so, by so. It's a whole like paragraph if you read certain books of who and where this came from. It's like tracing every single person that reported this hadith as sound. So nobody narrates from their teacher's teacher, for example. Everybody met in person and heard directly from the person who narrated to them. This is how they chased the train of ahadith. All narrators are known. trustworthy and righteous. They don't commit major sins in public, and we know them. We know their biography. Number two, the requirement is precision and accuracy of narrators. All the narrators in the chain are known to have strong memories and narrate accurately. And this is where I can say to you that I'm very cautious because I don't have a good memory. And this is why I'm very scripted and why I look up the hadiths and read them, a hadith, and have the verses with me. Also, the third condition is that they cannot conflict any known ahadith. If there's one hadith that conflicts a well-known larger body of ahadith, it can become rejected. Number four, there can be no hidden defects. This is a technical requirement and refers to tadlis, the subtly hiding who you are narrating the hadith from, among other things. The point here is that qasr is awarded by Allah. No one should think I am going to pray 4 rak'ah and get extra rewards. This is the point I want to make here. The second point we need to know is, when does qasr begin? Once one is decided, this is qasr for them. So this Friday, for example, let's say this is not true, I'm making it up. I'm going to go to Atlanta. Clearly that would be qasr for me. But when will qasr begin? It does not begin with my intention when I book my flight. What about I pack my bags, I'm about to leave my house for the airport, and it is duhur. Can I start my qasr combining once I know I'm stepping out the door heading to the airport? Can I just perform duhur and asr qasr and get it out of the way from my house? These are the questions that come up here. What about once I get to the airport, I get on the plane, and I'm waiting for the plane to taxi, and the Maghrib window is closing? Can I pray Dhuhr and Asr while I'm on the runway? In other words, what I meant to say is the Maghrib window is opening. In the plane and still in my city. So the question is, when does Qasr begin? And of course, just like we studied about the Mufassir and the mileage, there are several opinions, but the overwhelming majority of the Sahaba, the companions, and the Tabi'un, the generation of Muslims who followed the companions, Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ, had one opinion. So alhamdulillah, we can say in this case, we have a vast majority saying that Safar begins when you travel outside the walls of the city. Now, we know that in the modern day, most cities do not have walls. When one leaves their final habitations of the city that they consider their home, and their back is to the city, and you're walking or riding out, even if you're looking back and see the city, but you have left the premises of your land, not your country, but your city. There are numerous narrations from the Sahaba themselves. Of them is that some of the Sahaba during Ramadan, when they were going to go on a long journey, they did not fast that day, but they fasted when they woke up. So I know I'm going to be traveling, but my plane doesn't leave till 3 o'clock. Can one just wake up and say, no, I'm not fasting because I'm leaving today at 3 o'clock? I have a Safar at 2 p.m. I'll become a Safar at 2 p.m. So I'm not going to fast today. No, it is the day of Ramadan and you're not a Mufassir yet. So now imagine in those days, you're waking up at 7 a.m. You're not going to be able to fast, right? You know that you're going to break your fast, but you are in Ramadan at your residence. So you will be fasting some of that day. You're not a Mufassir yet. Some of the Sahaba, when they walked outside the city, he said to his servants, okay, give me the water. Now give me something now to break my fast. I have a long day ahead of me. So here's an example. They did it once they got clear out of the city. We're going to break the fast anyway. And his servant said, I can see the walls of the city. He said, it doesn't matter. Give it to me now. We are in Musafir now. Even if you can see the walls of the city, but you have left the premises. In those days, again, they had walls. And in our time, there are no walls. So we have to use a bit of cultural understanding because we know habitations get smaller and smaller as we leave our city. So even as you get outside of Orlando on the 408, for example, and you say, I'm going to go to Claremont, you start getting into some smaller places. You're out of Orlando, but you're in habitation, you're out of it. But there is still some area generally called the overall city, and it is not an exact line again. When one is left and one feels that they are no longer in their city of residence, then Musafir can begin, and that is when one can start their qasr, their combining. Similar to if you were going to fast and you're not fasting because you're traveling, if you start in Ramadan, you would fast until that time came that you were not there, and then you would break your fast. This is proven in an actual hadith by Anas ibn al-Malik, when he said we prayed Dhuhr 4 rak'ah in Medina when going for Hajj. Then we got to Dhul Hulayfa, we prayed 2 rak'ah. Now, what's interesting here is that Dhul Hulayfa is literally a 10-minute drive from Medina for those of us who've been there. It is definitely not 4 barids or 16 farsakh or so many milits. Dhul Hulayfa is literally 10 minutes from Medina. Those who have done Umrah from Medina know that Dhul Hulayfa is literally just out the city of Medina. So Anas, may Allah be pleased with him, says, in Medina we prayed 4 rak'ah. And when we got to Dhul Hulayfa, we prayed 2, even though we haven't gone the distance. Even if you follow the 4 barud or whatever the position, you are still within that, but Musafir has begun. So when does Musafir begin? We see 2 sort of examples here that seem a little conflicting. It begins when you leave the city or area of your inhabitants. This is the second point. The third point, a lot of times questions come up about Musafir praying behind a muqim, and a muqim is a resident or inhabitant versus praying behind a Musafir, a traveler. And what do we do then? So I am a Musafir, I am traveling, I'm suddenly behind someone who is praying, and it makes a difference whether we're praying somewhere outside or we're praying in the masjid. But it is a pretty much unanimous consensus that if one is a traveler praying behind a resident, one has the permissibility to go to a masjid where the imam is not traveling and the imam prays 4 rak'ah. Essentially, almost by unanimous consensus, the scholars say we must pray 4. Why? Because in the ahadith, the imam has been made to be followed. Once you join the congregation, you are following the imam. He's carrying your prayer. And praying the full 4 is permissible. It is not haram, and following the imam is wajib. So we prefer the wajib over the permissible because praying 2 is sunnah and praying 4 is jaiz. It's permissible or allowed in Arabic. But if you were alone, it would be against the sunnah. So here we have an exception to the rule if you're praying behind the local imam. But in jama'ah, congregation, the Musafir will pray all 4. The opposite applies if a Musafir is leading. So I go to Atlanta, the imam says, we would like to ask Imam Sykes to lead the prayer. And this is reported from the Sahaba. Some of them led the Salah, and after 2 rak'ah, they finished and said, we are the people who are traveling. So you continue your Salat, you do the other 2. So the imam prayed 2 rak'ah. Is a single interpolation of prescribed movements, and supplications performed by Muslims as part of the prescribed supplications performed by Muslims as part of prescribed obligatory prayer known as salat. I'm trying to give you the definition of rak'ah there. Each of the 5 daily prayers observed by Muslims consists of a number of rak'ah, and it is obvious that one who isn't al-Mufasir, a resident, doesn't get the concession of shortening the prayer because the traveling imam is leading. They must pray 4. Even though it has been allowed for traveling imams to pray 2, some of our scholars have said that if there is a jama'at, it would be better, that means a congregation, for the imam to pray 4 in order not to cause confusion. So you have a best practice, you have an alternative practice. Particularly in these days where most people do not know fiqh, and sometimes I forget it. There's so many details. Quite honestly, every time I go back and study something, I realize something I have forgotten. Now, this is why I want to have mercy on you as students, encourage you not to be hard on yourself. When I am traveling and I am with just a few people, I will lead the 2 rak'ah as a traveler. But if there is a large group of people, say 20 or 200, I will pray the 4 rak'ah for the greater good of the congregation. I would prefer to get the reward of availing myself to Allah's concession, but we don't want people to be in a confused state when they have made the effort to pray in congregation and are standing for Allah in salah. I'm not going to confuse a larger group for my convenience. The scholars have said that humanity has the option, and it's up to them to weigh the pros and cons. Nonetheless, if I or anyone else were to do qasr, it is my job to make an announcement that I will be praying 2 and that the people behind me should pray 4. And so the next point, which I will, inshallah, take up with you, not next week because I'll be at UU Ormond, but in the next class, will be to look at what do we do if we are traveling and we are going to reach our home within the window of salah. And I really want to help clarify this because it's very important that we know these things. I'm going to wrap it up now because I want to make sure that I do put these actions that I've requested in the chat for you, as I need to take off and get to the masjid to set up for our afternoon event. I love you all for the sake of Allah. I again beg you to pray for the people that are suffering in Palestine, our beloved brothers and sisters. And I beg you to pray for our continued work in da'wah and for our continued growth in our iman as believers, inshallah, rabbil alameen. Transcendent are you, O Allah. I praise you as you praise yourself.